Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello, this is Leora Mandel. I want to welcome you to Israel News Talk's radio special entitled Women of Strength. What I'm going to share with you are 3 women who have gone through tremendous life challenge and continue to go through tremendous life challenge. Similar challenges, different challenges, who have really found tools and perspectives that have given them strength. I think when anyone goes through a major challenge in life, there's always this question for women that just seem to somehow come through. It doesn't mean there isn't struggle. It doesn't mean there aren't down times and real points of struggling with the pain. Yet at the same time, these are women, these are people that live their lives forward, is the way I'd like to see it and think of it. And these are people that we find inspirational, because there's times where a person can have a life challenge that is so overwhelming, so strong, that I think anyone could look at them and say, you know what, I can understand how they just sort of shut down, how they could not continue. How could someone continue after going through such a life challenge, or continuing to have to live day after day, year after year through a major challenge? And yet when someone can make the choice to say, you know what, my life, the trajectory of my life has completely changed from where I thought it was. I was hit with something that really threw me off and threw my whole life in a totally different direction than where I thought it was going to go. And yet I can still build. I can still live forward. I can still find joy. The question is, what are the tools this person is using that gives them the ability to live forward, to gives them the ability to build, to live life again? And what's so interesting is that I think with each of these women, you will see that they're very real. Even years after something has already happened, even years with the time to adjust and realizing that my life will never be what it was so many years ago, these are women who have each made the choice, the decision to continue to live their lives as fully as they can within the circumstances, the new reality that they find themselves. And as much as they've made this choice to live forward, it doesn't mean that there isn't still struggle. Years could have passed, but there still may be struggle. There still is struggle for the pain, for the challenge, for having to face the reality that is so different than where they thought their lives would be. And yet, even in spite of that struggle, there still is, again, growth, living forward, engaging in life, and building new life. Now, what are the tools that these women use to give them strength? As you'll hear, some of the tools might sound similar, each with their own unique way of tapping into them. And some, what works for one is something very different than for the other. I think the idea behind listening to these women is to give us strength, to learn from them, and for us to find our own inner place of how can I live life with any struggle I may be going through, whether it be considered major or something relatively small. Everybody in life goes through a struggle at some point in life, and there's so much to learn from those who've gone through some big challenges. What are the tools we can choose to use to live our lives forward?
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Hello and welcome to Israel News Talk Radio special on Women of Strength. I'm here with Jody Teicher, who has a unique story with unique challenges. Jody married for the first time at 52 years of age, and 2.5 years into her marriage, her husband was diagnosed with a tumor that was behind his sinuses and eye and later spread to his brain. And after 5.5 months in the hospital, in Jody's own words, Hashem took him home. So Judy, I think about, again, this is just, everyone has a bigger story in life, but this is a part of the focusing on the challenge of the story of your life. And just the fact that you had to wait so long for your life's partner in and of itself was a very big test and its own challenge. And then you're given this gift of your life's partner who you waited so long for, and then you had to go through the pain of his illness and the loss of your husband. So after this whole journey and this all the pain and the challenge, especially with the receiving this gift and then the loss, how have you continued to live your life forward, especially after such a loss? What tools and perspectives have you used to help you move forward?
Leora, I'm truly blessed that in my case, once again, Hashem brought the refuah before the makkah, because the way I had been living my life prior to this, although I had to dig much deeper into it, and I got tested in ways I never could have possibly imagined, continued to be the way that I needed to live my life after. And that is primarily from a place of gratitude. While my husband was in the hospital, every single day before I left his side at night, we would say 3 things that we were thankful for. And those things would often include the illness. And I needed to bring that gratitude forward with me. In order to talk about going forward, sometimes you first have to take a step back. So going even further back than being in my husband's hospital room is being a child, and my father teaching me to speak to Hashem as if he were my tati in heaven. My father was an orphan, and the best way that he knew how to have a father in his life was to create that personal relationship with his father in heaven. And my mother was a woman of incredible strength. And as I was crying, she would say, I can't understand you when you're crying. Wipe away those tears and tell me how we're going to move forward from here.
Wow.
So I take forward with me my mother, my father, and my husband, who every time we would arrive home safely, as he turned the ignition off on the car, he would say, thank you, Hashem, for bringing us home safely. So talking to Hashem, gratitude, and the strength of my mother and the faith of my father is the best way that I can answer you.
So then the strength that you have, you're saying it didn't just come in the midst of this crisis and the midst of this immense challenge. It's something that you've been building over years and years and years. And you're saying that the foundation of that strength really comes from gratitude.
I believe so. And I think that that's true of everyone. Any challenge that Hashem places in front of us, he's been building us up towards our entire lives. It's our choice. How are we going to do our dance? How are we going to move through this? Are we going to have post-traumatic stress, which, by the way, I completely understand and I'm sure that I have some of, or are we going to have post-traumatic growth? Who are we going to become after this major challenge has occurred?
Was this something that you were able to tap into immediately, or is this something that you sort of have to look back and realize at a certain point, I have to make this choice to tap into something that I've had all my life, but I really need to choose to tap into it now?
I think both things are true. I was blessed that Hashem chose me to be the primary caretaker for both my father and my mother over the course of about 20 years. They had serious illnesses. And so I had learned that lesson on some level by being their caretaker, but I had no idea what it would feel like as a kala. It's a very different experience. So I would say it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. During the course of my husband's illness, I was constantly surrounded by friends and family, but I found that once my husband left the world, I really needed to be alone. People couldn't offer enough. My community is incredible, but I needed to be alone in my home with my husband and Hashem. And the way that I refer to that time, and I believe it is ongoing, is my year, I'm sorry, I may cry, but I will get it together. My year of Yichud with Hashem, with Shemayim. My year of Yichud in Shemayim. Because I was still a kala. My year of Yichud with my marriage was still fresh in my mind. We had only been married 2.5 years when he got ill. And I took that first year very seriously. I'm a very social person. I'm very connected to my community, my friends, my students, my family. But that first year I knew Hashem gave me this gift. I had better focus on what it means to set the foundation for a marriage. And the same thing was true the year after. I couldn't just jump back into my life. I had to figure out, who am I going to be in this new chapter? And one of the ways I did it was by talking every single day to Hashem, well, I shouldn't say every day. Actually, there was a period of time when I realized I hadn't spoken to Hashem. I was so overcome with upset, feeling cheated, even, I don't like to say anger, but even anger. And I realized that I hadn't been talking to him. And that was a huge wake-up call for me, because I had remembered learning, as long as you're fighting with your spouse, you still have a chance. When you guys stop talking, now you're in a big trouble. And the same thing is true with Hashem. So I would go back and forth between like yelling at him, how dare you steal my husband? And then being on my knees saying, thank you so much for allowing me the zechus of loving and being by the side of your precious son for as long as I could. And I still have that experience. Part of me is so upset with Hashem, and part of me is so grateful to him. And I just have to learn to move through that as best I can.
See, the struggle, and I so appreciate how open you're being about the struggle, because I think that's something that deep inside everyone can relate to. I think sometimes you hear of people that will just share the side of, turning to God, turning to Hashem gives us our strength, and that's how we go on. And at the same time, as you're saying, when we're going through pain, that God, turning to God does give us strength, but sometimes God is also aware and has given us the circumstances that have brought the pain. There is tremendous struggle. And yet you're sharing with us that you can be in pain and struggle, and yet you can still connect yourself with strength to God. You can do it all at the same time.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, not only with Hashem, but with every relationship, the more authentic we are, the more juice there is to get from the fruit. It's like when we're pretending, when we're putting on these masks, then what's really going on? Like, there's this idea, I think it was taught to me that it was said by Rav Shmuel Hirsch, this idea of lama and lame. And so what is lama? Lama is the why, and the lame is for what purpose. And so I think that the asking of the why can only bring us down a tunnel that is dark and deep and endless. There's no answer that I'm going to get in this lifetime of why. But the for what, I get to co-create with Hashem. The for what is what you and I are doing right now. The for what is to stand in my strength and my vulnerability, in my brokenness and my wholeness, and say, Hashem, you left me here. You took him and you left me here. How is it that you want me to walk my life's journey, to bring my husband Naches, for myself, I'm not a selfless person, for my own joy? How do I experience it? And how can what happened to us serve as some sort of a lesson for the people that I encounter?
These are huge, huge questions.
And I promise you, I don't have answers. I have great questions, but I don't have.
But to a degree, it sounds like you're saying these are the questions that are now the foundation of your living your life forward. Saying Absolutely. There has to be some purpose, instead of focusing on what happened and why, living forward, saying, Lama, for what is all this about? And saying, based on how I'm going to struggle with answering these questions is how I'm going to continue to live my life forward. Thank you. That's exactly it. And that's the way I think that we find joy. What is Jewish joy? Jewish joy is meaning. The only way that I will be able to truly receive joy. Sometimes when you first lose someone and you hear yourself laughing, you almost feel like, oh, I'm not a person of laughter. And then I would realize one of my husband's greatest joys was telling jokes and making people laugh. There was an abundance of laughter at his levaya. I started with a joke. My husband's second son came to visit for a visit in a very inclement weather, and he was riding his bicycle. And our rabbi was there visiting with my husband, and he turned to Rav Naftali Citron and said, "Nu, this is the Naches. My son does biker cholim," right? So he was a man of jokes. And so when I first heard myself laughing, I felt bad. And then I realized, no, this is bringing his life forward. And so Jewish joy, as I was saying, is meaning. That's what we need. What's powerful, too, is you're saying you can be strongly connected to Hashem and to God, and at the same time struggle. You can be in tremendous pain and struggle. At the same time, you can laugh. That sometimes we think it's either one or the other, but part of the strength comes from recognizing that you can have both. Absolutely. I was in a learning recently with Yeshiva Simchat Shlomo for Pesach Sheni, and I remember somebody saying, a life without contradictions is not a life that's truly lived. We have to struggle with the extent to which any kli has the capacity for light, it has the capacity for darkness. And it's our job to decide how to move in that space. Wow. That's very powerful. I think a lot of times people have a hard time saying, how can I have joy if I'm suffering, if I'm in pain? But what you're telling us is that to be able to move forward, you can have both. You can say, I can still be in pain right now. I can still be struggling, but at the same time, I can still choose to live my life with joy. And it's a contradiction, but this is how I move forward.
Absolutely. And this is not my statement, but I've heard that what is the difference between suffering and pain? Pain is when you have purpose. Suffering is pain without purpose, and I choose to have purpose.
Wow. Jody, I want to thank you so much for joining us and for your words of strength. Thank you so much. When we return,
thank you.
Israel News Talk Radio, Women of Strength.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
And welcome to our Israel News Talk Radio special on Women of Strength. I am here with Cheri Mandel, who is the mother of Kobe Mandel, who 19 years ago was murdered by terrorists in Israel. And since that murder, she's used her grief to give strength and comfort to others through becoming a grief counselor, writing books. You have a few books, Cheri: The Blessing of a Broken Heart, The Road to Resilience, which I have read and is very powerful, and a children's book called The Elephant in the Sukkah. And you established the Kobe Mandel Foundation, which runs healing programs for other families in Israel who have been directly affected by terror. And, as I try to think about the kind of grief you must have gone through after Kobe's death, it's just so hard for me to even wrap my mind around it. And yet you've been so successful in taking that grief and using it as a tool to empower you and give so much strength to others. I know this has been a long road, but how have you been able to do this? How have you taken the grief from the death of your son and enabled it to empower you for yourself and to be able to give so much to others?
I think I had to in a way, because the pain can be power, and the pain was so intense. Kobe's yahrzeit was on Friday, this past Friday, and it's still so painful. But I don't use the word lucky. We were fortunate that we were surrounded by community. And that's one of the steps in my book, The Road to Resilience. But people gave us a lot. They gave us a lot of comfort. They helped us cook meals and take care of kids, and they were there for us. And I also had friends who helped me emotionally. Like one of my friends was a grief counselor, and she did massage. Another friend did EMDR. And we ended up being able to take the help we received, and to give it to others. Because I think when you receive a lot, it's natural to want to give it. Also, we saw our kids, and our children were very young when Kobe was my oldest. So he would be 33 now, and almost 33. And we saw our other children. They were really hurt, but they couldn't really show it to their friends, and their teachers could help them, but they were isolated, I think, in their pain. And children become silent victims in families like ours. So we realized that we wanted to create a place where they would feel free to be happy, but also to be with other kids who understood what it meant to deal with not just loss, but death. To have death in your life as a child changes you.
Absolutely. So would you say, especially you're talking about there's this foundation you created to help other families, in the process of your own family healing from this tragedy, part of the process was reaching out to help others who also needed healing. And in the process, do you find you were also, so to speak, helped with your own healing process?
Definitely. I needed to be with other people in loss, because I felt like I had lost the normal world, the regular world, that wasn't available to me anymore. And a lot of things just fell away that had given my life meaning. And the only thing that gave my life meaning was my family and Yiddishkeit, and also being able to give. And I just feel like Hashem made us shlichim, he made us messengers, because there was a need for this camp. And at first the camp was only for terror victims. The camp has been also going on for 19 years. It's a sleepaway camp. It was only for terror victims in the beginning. Somebody whose parent or sibling had died, been murdered. And recently we've opened it up to other tragedies. So we have bereaved kids because of all sorts of reasons. And it's like a secret society, because people look at the children and you can't tell that anything is different about them. But when they're together, then they feel free to share, and they feel free to be happy. Like we have counselors who say Camp Kobe is the happiest place in the world.
Wow. So finding happiness within that pain. But again, it's from the power of being with others that you feel like can really understand what you're going through.
Yeah, but it's not happiness within the pain. It's happiness on the other side of the pain, because the pain is there. The pain is always going to be there. But you can sometimes, I can think of it as like the pain is rooted in the ground, but you can grow very high from it, because you need that happiness. When you feel that happiness, you appreciate it, because you know how vulnerable we are. So feeling that happiness, I think it's almost like a truer kind of happiness, because it contains its opposite.
Now, I've heard from some people, they almost feel, how can I feel happy if I have all this pain? And it sounds like you're saying you really can have both at the same time. They almost, I've heard before, a guilt that people would feel of, how could I actually be enjoying myself right now? I'm still in pain. But at the same time, it sounds like you're saying you can really have both, and you need both.
Well, I think it's hard to have both, but when you recognize that they are like siblings, they're not, they don't contradict each other. They come together, because every happiness contains a sadness, and I think every sadness also contains some kind of happiness. I mean, it sounds kind of sadistic, but there's a merging, let's say.
That's very powerful, and that's very true. And I'm sure your recognition has helped you overcome the way you have, because I think there's so often you hear, and understandably so, when a person's gone through some sort of a tragedy, they just shut down from it. And at the same time, it sounds like you've taken the pain that you experience that's real, and it ignited you into action and into so much growth.
Yeah,
how do you explain that?
How do I explain that? First of all, I don't think I've overcome my son's murder. It's just, I will never overcome it. It's always there, and it's always bringing me into a place of pain. I'm not always there. We just had the yard site, so it's a hard. Well, no, it's also because with the yard site, usually a lot of people come, and I hug everybody. And this site we didn't touch, and I felt like I just didn't get the catharsis I needed. I didn't have the connection with people that I needed. I think that I was very connected to people, and that I was able to receive a lot from the community around me, and that propelled me forward. Also, I'm a writer, so I had something to do with the pain. And I think also because I'm American, and an immigrant, that I had a kind of freedom in how I chose to be, because I didn't have family here, and I didn't really know what it meant to be a terror victim, have this kind of loss. So, and also my husband, I have to say that it's really my husband and family who gave us I don't like the word strength, because I feel like it's important also to be weak. I think that the fact that I cried for a year basically helped me, because I went through a process, and I still go through a process. But I think it's also my husband that we faced it together, that we came very close together.
So again, it's even what you started out with saying, that community help, the help with friends and the help of your husband and also of your children, that all of that support is giving you a sense of meaning and purpose to keep on pushing forward and pushing through. But you're allowing yourself to receive that support from others instead of shutting yourself down from the help that others want to give to you. You allowed yourself to receive that help and that love and that support.
Yeah, I received it. We all did. We just received a tremendous amount. I think it's love. And also when you receive all that love, it's like a gift that continues. But also, there was nothing for kids then. There was no camp for bereaved children, and our kids needed it. But again, this is a powerful, what you're sharing with us is so powerful, that what you recognized you needed, it enabled you to create a mission and fulfill that for yourself, but also for others who are going through a bereavement process. Yeah, we also did it for mothers, for bereaved mothers and widows, because one day I met Rena. Kobe was killed with Yosef Ishran. They were both in 8th grade. And I saw his mother one day in the first year, and I said, how are you doing? How are you? And she was like, I just need some time for myself. And when she said that, I thought, yeah, what a great idea. We'll do a retreat for bereaved mothers. So I was able to take the friends who had helped me, and we created this women's healing retreat. And we've been doing it really for the past 19 years, where we have different retreats for widows and bereaved mothers, 2-day retreats. Wow. But I needed them, and Rena needed them, so we created it. But do you feel to an extent that when you were doing, again, taking action for what you needed, but you were doing it and expanding it to others, that almost created, beyond helping yourself as a mission, do you think that helped give you the strength that you've continued to have? Definitely, because also I spoke terrible Hebrew. My Hebrew still isn't great. I didn't really consider myself so Israeli. And then all of a sudden I was working with all these Israeli women and children, and these mothers, I learned so much from them, the Israeli mothers. And being able to create this space for healing was really a kind of like miracle, I think. That it definitely helped me. And this idea of what you're talking about, creating a space for healing, I think that is exactly what your mission has been for yourself, and to create that for others, and recognizing again that it's not that the pain ever goes away. That's very important, to allow yourself, as you said, to experience the pain. And at the same time, when you allow yourself to experience the pain, as I like the example you gave, that the sibling of pain is still happiness. And with that together, you can continue to live your life forward. Cheri, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us on this special Israel News Talk Radio special.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
Hello and welcome back to our Israel News Talk Radio special on Women of Strength. How can one live with a serious disability, a chronic illness whose symptoms progressed to not being able to speak or walk normally, among a myriad of other health challenges, and still choose to live life with optimism and joy? Such a woman is Cheri Tannenbaum, who's written the book Woman of Few Words. She writes, I have suffered since 1972 from a neurological movement disorder called Dystonia musculorum deformans. Dystonia is not my essence, nor does it define me, but it has played a key role in my life. and that it has. There is such an effect that this illness has had upon Cheri, and it's been so pervasive of her whole life. And it has come with a myriad of challenges, which she writes about in her book, Woman of Few Words. She gives us a sense of what her life has been like. It's an autobiography where she really goes through the process of her illness, the effects that it has had on her. And the effects are many. For so many of us, the way we interact with the world is by walking through the world, by getting around, going places. And Cheri, from a very early point in this illness, in this chronic illness, her walking was affected to the effect that she never knew if she was going to be falling. She might fall anywhere she went, and it got to the point that she really was limited to being in a wheelchair. Another way we really interact with the world and with others, take in the world, create relationships, is by speaking to other people. And Cheri's speech was very much affected by this illness. For 40 years, she really couldn't speak very much. Only the people in her immediate family had some sense of what she was trying to say. Through a miracle, which you can read about in the book, her speech has more recently improved to the extent, as we'll hear at the end of this segment, Cheri has a very powerful message to share with us in her own words about what has given her the strength and courage to continue on with optimism and joy in life, but to live so many years in silence, pretty much in silence, not really being able to communicate with others. You can see how this would be very limiting the experiences of life that we have, how we can share ourselves, how we can wake up each day and want to engage in the world. Cheri talks about in her book that she was blessed later on with 3 what she calls miracle children. These were children that she was not guaranteed very easily, partially because of her illness, that she would be able to conceive. And at the same time, she talks about the struggle of recognizing that her children, to some degree growing up, were embarrassed bringing friends home because their mother was very different. It was hard to understand her when she spoke. It might have scared children who were not used to how she spoke. The way she was able to get around, walking, etc., was not the same as most other mothers, and she sensed that her children had some embarrassment as young children growing up. She writes that later on, as they got older, having a mother who has a chronic illness and disabilities really gave them such strength of character, which is so beautiful. But also the pain of being at a daughter's wedding and realizing you can't dance with your own daughter at her wedding, and wishing and praying that some miracle would happen just to dance with your daughter on her wedding day. And yet that miracle never came, and Cheri had to be able to accept that. When you try not to have self-pity, especially when you're struggling every single day, throughout the day, with just what many of us take for granted as basic functioning, you want to try to not have self-pity, pitying yourself. And yet when you go places and you see other people's pitying looks, when they talk to you, as Cheri will say, she has a fully sound mind and intellect, but because she has such struggle and for so many years wasn't really able to express herself because of the debilitating aspects of this illness, that people will talk to you as if there's something wrong with you. Or they'll make comments of, you're miskina, you are a pitiable person. And you're trying not to have self-pity, pitying yourself for the struggles that you go through day to day. Yet then those are comments that you hear when you go out and about. How do you stay strong inside? This book of Woman of Few Words is a real journey of seeing what Cheri has gone through. Again, it's an autobiography, seeing her journey, but at the same time, the reason why I find it so powerful is because you're really going through the struggle with her. On the one hand, Cheri has a real commitment to living her life with joy, with optimism, with strength, of facing each new day and trying to find what she can do instead of focusing on what she can't do. What can she do to make her life meaningful and purposeful? And focusing on all aspects of life that she has that are meaningful and purposeful. At the same time, I think what's very powerful and real is that we see the struggle. She shares her personal struggles as much as she's chosen to make this commitment to live a life of meaning and purpose and joy. It doesn't mean it's always easy, and there are real struggles. For example, I think that anyone going through any major challenges or even minor challenges in life recognize that when we have a sense of faith in God, when we can turn to God and turn our troubles over to God, that can give us tremendous strength. And Cheri very much does this, as she writes in her book. It's very meaningful to ask, what does God want from me? How can I use this as a vehicle to bring out my hidden potential? How can this bring me closer to God? How can I use this difficulty to help me make an impact on the world, to bring good into the world, and to be a shining light to all the other nations? Now, this is a powerful perspective of strength that Cheri shares, and it is really this perspective of turning to God and recognizing that God has a mission for her, even with her struggles and challenges, gives her tremendous strength. At the same time, in another place in the book, Cheri writes, I know that God has blessed me with so much, but when I have a test, my walking and balance difficulties, in my face 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sometimes it is hard to see the blessings. I so much want to connect to you, but you're making it very hard for me. And again, this is the very real part of the struggle. I want to connect to you, God. I recognize that there's something, I have so many blessings even within my challenges. At the same time, these challenges do make it very hard for me to connect to you, God. And it's interesting because when Sherri writes about what are the tools that she finds gives her strength, one of them is prayer. She has personal prayer with God every single day. She writes about this in the book. And again, what I think is so real and I think we can relate to is that there's oftentimes two sides of this, that God is our strength and we have faith. And Sherri definitely has a rock of faith. She is strong in her faith. At the same time, having faith, especially when we're going through struggle, doesn't mean that there isn't also struggle within that faith. And Sherri very much expresses that in her book. So again, one of the things that I think is so powerful about Sherri's message is that it's so real with the optimism, but also with the struggle. Now, something that I really appreciate about Sherri too is that she shares with us tools that have helped her particularly go through her struggle and challenge with the optimism and joy that she has. How has she done it? There's times we meet inspirational people and we can understand, you know what, you're going through so much. I understand that you're really just feeling down or you've sort of checked out and you're not really engaging with life. We might be able to understand it, especially someone who has struggled for so long. And yet when we find a person, I would say this is an inspirational person, someone who is struggling so much and yet within that struggle has chosen to engage with life and live life with joy. But the question we sometimes ask is, how do they do it? What are the tools they use to help them? And I think all of us can learn. I mean, these are the kind of inspirational people we want to be able to learn the tools that they use to help themselves. And Sherri does share some with us. She writes, I always wear an upbeat look on my face. And I like what she wrote. I always wear an upbeat look on my face. It doesn't always mean that it's a natural expression of how she feels, but that she chooses that that's the way I want to present myself to the world. And I think we can all relate to the fact there's times that maybe we don't feel a certain way inside. We're feeling down, we're feeling glum, we're in a bad mood. But if I put a smile on my face, it will have an effect on how I feel. And this is something that Sherri does. She writes, a disability is only limiting if you allow it to take over and define who you are as a person. And that is powerful. As she writes at the beginning of her book, this is not who she is. It affects her life, but it doesn't define her life. And that commitment to recognizing, how do I think about myself? How do I feel about my circumstances? How do I think about my circumstances? Do they define me? Do they limit me? Yes, maybe. But it doesn't mean that I can't exceed those limitations. So much depends on how I think about my circumstances. Finally, Sherri writes, communication and mobility are the way of the world, and when one is affected in both these areas, life is a constant struggle. You may be asking yourself, as I frequently do, what keeps this woman going? What keeps this woman fighting? What helps this woman haul herself out of bed every morning to face these seemingly unsurmountable challenges? We'll hear from Sherri herself. What is the source of her strength and courage?
You might ask, what keeps me going? How do I drag myself out of bed every morning when it would be so much easier for me to just stay there and pull the covers over my head and never get up? Well, I take life every second as it comes. I know that my day will be a constant struggle and full of humiliation. I try to surround myself with positive, supportive people. I take help from others when I need it. I always say, I'm not helpless. I just need some help. I try to give to someone else to transcend my own self-absorption. I hear the call of God. See how I am helping you to bring out your greatness so that you can be an inspiration to others. I hear the call of my husband, loving me and rooting for me, and saying I still need a life partner despite your disability. I hear the call of my children, loving me and rooting for me, and each saying, I still need you. I hear the cry of the people I know, loving me and rooting for me, and saying, we all still need you. I hear my creative spirit calling me and saying, there is still more beauty that needs to be put into this world.
I have to say the strength of each of these women inspires me to live more, to be more. I want to thank you all for joining us. Leora Mandel, Israel News Talk Radio, Women of Strength.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.